So let's talk about what a data source is here. So everything in Java world is an object. So if you have Oracle database that you need to talk to, and MySQL database also that you need to talk to, or some other X database also. So what we can do is in our application we can configure one or more data source objects. Within that data source object you can have connections and all that available. So you can use the data source 1 to get a MySQL connection, data source 2 to get an Oracle connection if you have configured like one or more data sources in your application. So that's what is called a data source object. So using these objects, we can deploy various databases, related information as objects in an application. So preferred means of getting a connection to a data source. So like yeah, keeping a data source object, and through data source if you can get a connection, that's probably a best practice to use if you have more than one data sources in an application. So data source types. A basic data source implementation produces standard connection objects that are not pooled or used in a distributed transaction. That means it's a standard standalone application, like how you install in your computer right now. It's not distributed. It's not been used by anybody else in the network. You don't have a network, right? It's just your own standalone system. Nobody's using it, right? So it's not distributed. And a data source implementation that supports connection pooling produces connection objects that participate in connection pooling. That is, connections that can be recycled. That means this is very important concept. What is connection pooling? Say if I have an application, um, like I set the connection pool size to 40. That means when the application is up and running itself, that means you have a server and you're launching your application. When the application is up and running itself, we make sure we have 40 connections available. That means we don't let the users create their connections, just like how we are doing in our examples, all our examples. We are creating a connection like this, right? Driver manager dot get connection. We don't do that often in the application. What we do is we maintain pool of connections. We maintain like 40 or 50 depending on your application size. We maintain pool of connections. So once somebody uses a connection, they just release it to the pool again, and that becomes available, and next person whoever wants to use it can use it. That means we maintain pool of connections. That way we'll not make sure like we'll make sure like um, it's been managed properly, it has been closed properly, and all that stuff. So connection pooling is very important. That means in your application you make sure these many connections available all the time. uh, uh, Whoever wants it, they take the connection out, use it, and release it again back to the pool. That way it becomes available to the next thread. Okay. Then, a data source implementation that supports distributed transactions produces connection objects that can be used in a distributed transaction. That is, a transaction that accesses two or more databases. So, if a connection involves more than one database, then it is called distributed. And also, transactions that are actually, say, for example, you need to distribute a transaction is such that you are talking to more than one database within that transaction. Say, for example, you are withdrawing some money from an ATM. Okay. So, withdrawal is probably in one database, like not exactly withdrawal can fall in this category. What I'm talking about is, say, if you have two databases and both databases need to be updated. Like, okay, I am the receiver and bank is a sender, say suppose, and you are using my application. Okay. You're using my application to withdraw transfer like a third party, or if you are familiar with money to India, probably think about it like money to India. So what exactly we are doing here is you debit a transaction from Bank of America, you're creating it to something like ICICI Bank in India. Okay. These are like two different entities. If you think about money to India, the moment they deduct money from Bank of America, they cannot just say like a transaction is done, right? they have to make sure it's been credited back in an India account as well. Until then, the transaction is not done. Okay, this is just an analogy I'm trying to give. In the same situation, in a similar situation, maybe this money to India is like 5-day transaction, so you may not feel like, oh, what is the need? But there are other kind of scenarios wherein you can only commit this transaction if you can think about that money to India cycle is not 5 days, it's just um, 5 minutes. Okay, so what you need to do is you got to debit Bank of America, you got to credit in ICICI Bank in the same transaction. If either of these fail, you have to roll back the transaction. That means you should say like you should feel like as if nothing happened, like you got to revert to old state. Otherwise, customers will face a problem like it is debited from their account, but it's not credited to ICICI, right? So this nobody is going to agree, right? It can be a pure software bug. We are going to bash money to India if they do that, right? So in the same way, like software can lead into these kind of issues. Or for example, if you take online reservation system, like it happened to me once in Indian Railway thing. What happened was I was using this IRCTC or some website. I booked a ticket. It registered, but it deducted my bank account twice just because I clicked on a refresh on a browser. So that means their transaction is not checking like both booking of a ticket and deducting the money from my account in the same workflow. That kind of problems can be introduced if we are not managing our transactions in a distributed transaction. That means it is this transaction after you get the connection from database A, connection from database B, and start the transaction and end the transaction should happen in between um, deducting from database A and updating the database B should both happen at the same time. If either one fails, it should roll back. So in those kind of stuff, we use distributed transactions. Distributed transaction is nothing but talking to more than one database within that transaction. That's the straight answer. Okay. Then cursors. So what are these cursors? Cursors are nothing but it's like a collection you can think about, or you can think about it like an array. Okay, cursor is nothing but think about it like an array. It has utilities, or closer one you can think about, because you guys know collections already, is iterator. Okay, iterator. So what does this iterator do? It can move forward, it can move backward, all that stuff, right? So in the same way, cursors also have methods like that. So that means once you fetch the data from the database, it is all stored in a cursor, and you can move forward to the next row, or you can move backward to the previous row, and all that stuff. That way, it is having a bunch of handy methods. You can go to the first row or last row within a collection, or before first row. That means you have the data 10 rows. It is not at the 10th row, it is not at the first row, it is pre first row. So you got to call next to go to the first row. So those kind of utility methods are available in cursors. And relative cursors, like moves the cursor relative to its current position. So these are all utility methods to move forward, backward, and all that. So updating rows in a result set. So we saw a result set, right? Result set was an interface. We saw that yesterday, right? So what it is doing, it is establishing a connection with the database, and then you want to do a modification to it. So to do a modification, what you need to do is you're going to get the statement, like create statement, and then you're going to execute the query, and you're going to insert. You're going to call insert row in that. Okay, but before that, what is that we are doing extra compared to yesterday? So yesterday we were thinking result set is all constant, right? That means you fire a query, you get the data, and you're going to use it. But here, if you see, we are using overloaded, okay, not overridden, overloaded method. Like we were using only create statement like this yesterday, But today we are using create statement with two parameters within it. Okay, that is actually giving us a statement object. Okay, so we got a statement in a different way. What are those parameters? Scrollable sensitive. That means if you add a new row, or if somebody updates a database, you're going to read the data instantaneously. Okay, that means if somebody modifies like select star from student, and if some thread adds a new student, it should be available in the result set immediately. So these are the parameters. That means this particular statement object that we got is aware of scroll. That means if somebody scrolls, it is sensitive to that. That means if somebody scrolls, meaning if somebody adds a new, okay, and if somebody updates something, it is sensitive to that. Scrolling is nothing but moving from top to bottom. So if somebody adds a new row, you are in last row. Say suppose if somebody adds a new row, um, you can still be able to scroll because there is another row somebody else added, right? So that is called scroll sensitive. That means if somebody added a new row, I should be able to sense it and move my still be able to move my scroller. I should not say to the user like it is done, right? That's how it is sensitive to that. And you can add a new row using the result set itself. Okay, so how are you going to add a new row? So here is the thing. What we are calling is move to insert row. That means it's going to go to the last row where you will be able to, it is going to move the cursor to the last row where you are able to insert the new row. Okay, so I updated my name and date of birth. Okay, um, I put name and date of birth, insert, right? I'm inserting, so insert and move back to the first row. So that means if after I execute this, like let me see, let me delete all the rows so it will be simple for you. As from yesterday onwards I've been adding bunch of rows, right? So let's remove bunch of stuff, so it will be simple for us. So okay, I deleted bunch of, okay. So now after I execute this, now if you see select star from training student, you just see two rows, right? After I execute this, because I'm inserting a new row, you should see the third row, right? This one. Let's try and execute this. Just ignore stuff that is not required. We'll make sure we'll talk about these as well in a bit, but just ignore for now. You don't need to know. I was just experimenting some stuff. Okay, so don't worry about anything else. So you have insert row, you're using that. Okay, so this is insert row example. Okay, so after I execute this, see here in the database table, see, you are able to go back to, like, you have added one more row. That's because in the result set, so you did some modifications in the result set such that insert row, you got the result set, you updated it, you did not call anything else, right? You just called insert row here, that's it. You added new stuff here and you asked it to insert row, and it inserted it, right? This is called like adding stuff to the result set. So you can modify the result set. Either you can do an insert or update, doesn't matter. Okay, I can share this example, new example, so it will be easy for you guys. Then insert a new row to the result set. So add a row to the result set object, and this is the example that you got to refer to. Then transactions. So I kept saying transactions here, right? I kept saying transactions here. What is a transaction? A transaction is a set of one or more statements that is executed as a unit. So either all of the statements are executed or none of the statements is executed. So you begin some transaction, and either all the statements are executed within it or none should be executed. Just like how we gave an example of railway reservation system or banking transaction. So either all the steps should be completed or should be rolled back to as if nothing happened. So that is what is called a transaction. And how do you define a transaction? Is set of one or more statements that is executed as a unit. Okay. Then, so yesterday we saw like disabling auto commit mode. When a connection is created, it is in auto commit mode. This means that each individual statement is treated as a transaction and it is automatically committed right after it is executed. That means the moment you said insert in MySQL, it inserted it yesterday, remember. You mean, though you said connection.set autocommit are false or true. Ideally, when you said connection.set autocommit false, it should not write to the database immediately. It should write to the database once you said con.set autocommit or con.set commit true. Okay. By default, in this database, it's autocommit true. Okay. So if you want to disable and you want to execute bunch of statements, once everything is successful, then only you want to write to the database, then you are going to say con.commit. Okay, the way to allow two or more statements to be grouped in a transaction is to disable the auto commit mode. This is demonstrated in the following code, like con.set auto commit false. That's it. So okay. Using a transaction to preserve data integrity. To avoid dirty reads when two users trying to update the same date using two different transactions. That means two different applications, like two different Java threads trying to write to the same row. Okay. What is going to happen? Dirty reads are nothing but you are thinking you are updating a record A. You are thinking you are updating a record A. Instead, you are actually updating that record has been modified by thread B already before you are actually writing it. So instead of reading the actual data, you are actually updating a stale data. That is what is called dirty read. Okay. Database uses some locking mechanism for updating the rows. That means when you are updating the row, database locks that row. That way it is not available for anybody else for write. It's going to lock it for write, but available for reads. That way it can introduce actually dirty reads. Okay. And how the locks are set on the data is determined by the transaction isolation level. This is very important. Like when you are actually connecting to the database and you want to fetch data from the database, you're going to actually read the data, and when you want to update something, you're going to log that row and update it. Like databases are designed for that. Like it is designed for multi-threaded applications and all that. But what is going to happen is mm, whoever is writing last is going to win. Okay, whoever is writing to the database last is going to win. That's how they are designed for. But in applications, say for example, you have an application, you are opening it on Windows. Okay, for example, you have opened it. You are updating the same record, like your profile, and you're updating your date of birth. Whereas at the same time, some back office people opened the same record and updated your address. Okay, ideally, like both of you are doing at the same time. Okay, in parallel, exact same time. So if, for example, you saved it first, whereas admin took some time and they saved it later. In the meantime, you have updated your date of birth, right? But if admin doesn't know that you have updated something, their date of birth, um, they are going to, if their thread is winning, they didn't know that you have updated date of birth, right? You have updated in thread A. They are updating it in thread B. they are not aware of you modifying date of birth. You are not aware of they are modifying just the address. If either one of you are actually winning it, like because you guys are modifying two different properties, ideally to our database, if you think about business scenario, both date of birth and new address both should be displayed on the database at the end of both of your transactions, right? But that is not going to happen if one of you are going to win. Am I making sense to you guys what I'm referring to? Are you following what I'm trying to arrive at? Like, you have two different threads, same record, your profile record. We're trying to update, okay? And one is trying to update your address, one is trying to update your date of birth. If either one only wins, if either one of you guys only win, we're going to lose the data. That's like bringing in data integrity problems. Uh, is it making sense to you? Teja, Brinda, are you guys following me?
Yes.
Okay. Brinda, is it making sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So if either one wins, it's a problem. Like a simple business case, right? Users may come back to us saying like, "Oh, I updated my date of birth. Why is it going away?" Right? So these kind
Hmm.
of problems needs to be addressed. These are all related to transactions. That means we need to introduce some stuff like transaction isolation levels. That means when you are actually modifying something, we need to bump up some locking. Like we need to introduce some locking mechanism that says like, oh, you are updating stale data, somebody else modified it, so thread B should actually refetch the data and then rewrite to the database, something like that. These are called um, optimistic and pessimistic locking. Like that means optimistic locking is thinking like, oh, I have the latest data all the time and I'm writing back to the database. Okay. If somebody is actually modifies something, I need there should be a mechanism that says like, oh, um, current data that I'm trying to update is stale, so I need to handle how the stale data needs to be updated. So we need to have some handling code. Okay, when you're writing, when thread A modified the data in the database, it should go up. We need to bump up the version ID to from one to like when they read the record, both of them read it at version ID 1. Okay, when thread A updated the data, version ID should be bumped up to 2. And there should be mechanism in place like when thread B is trying to update it, there should be a mechanism in place. Okay, in the database right now the version ID is 2, but you are sending me a version ID 1, uh, which is like uh, which is like you are updating stale data, so I'm not going to update it. So thread B fails, but there should be a mechanism. It needs to refetch the data, reset the properties that it is trying to modify, and then write back to the database. Okay, this is called optimistic locking. So user is thinking I am always updating the right values, and it's up to the application needs to handle. Okay, it's up to the application that needs to handle that. Oh, check the version ID and throw it away. Okay, so these are the things. If you are using plain JDBC like how we are dealing with from past two classes, you need to handle it on your own. Okay, you need to handle it on your own. If you are using frameworks like if you guys heard already, because you guys are looking at job descriptions probably, I don't know. If you have heard about Hibernate or any of the object relational mapping things like IBATIS or any other frameworks, they deal with it for you. Okay, they deal with it for you. They provide extra privileges for you while configuring the entity itself. So that's why people use frameworks. Okay, so JDBC is like you want to do everything on your own. Okay, you have the control of the connection object, you have the control of the transaction isolation levels. Not that I'm saying like those frameworks doesn't let you control it. They will let you control it, but if you are not controlling it, they have some defaults. that lets you deal with all these kind of locking problems. Okay, very very important interview question. What is the difference between an optimistic locking and a pessimistic locking? And on the side effect, we know what is optimistic locking, right? Now, pessimistic locking is like, oh, maybe somebody else modify the record already, so I'm going to keep it locked until my transaction is started, and until I am writing it back to the database, I'm going to keep my database row locked, which may introduce some slowness in the application, right? You guys, is it making sense? Like, okay, I'm making it single threaded. This is like, okay, my application supports multiple threaded, but I'm going to lock the record until until I read it and write it back. So nobody else is going to change it. That's like crazy, right? That's like you're actually stopping your application to write. It can introduce a lot of issues like starving threads and all that. Okay, but optimistic locking is a win-win situation, and you can handle it at the DAO layer, and customer is like agnostic to what is happening on the back end. Okay, um, is it making sense? Data integrity, like very important interview question. I ask this definitely if I'm interviewing somebody. Like, what is the difference between optimistic locking and pessimistic locking? Okay,
Can you repeat that?
which one? Both?
Yeah.
Okay. So optimistic locking, like what was your question? You did not understand it entirely, or till what part you understood?
Is optimistic locking user thinks that he's the only one who updates the data?
Yeah, and
Okay.
it's up to the DAO layer to handle it. Like to handle it. Oh, if he's updating stale data, refetch the good data and then update the modified properties and write it to the database. Okay. So
Okay.
to incorporate that, you need to have a column in your database called version ID or something, version number, that needs to be incremented whenever you are updating a record. Okay,
Okay.
so that is called optimistic log. Hibernate supports it by default for you. Like yeah, you can use it using a version column, and it helps you introducing optimistic locking in a simpler way. Whereas if you are using JDBC like this, like you need to write everything on your own, and you have to introduce that handling code for you. Hibernate actually, when you configure version ID, it throws something called stale object exception. But for you, you don't have the luxury. If you are using plain JDBC, you have to throw that. You have to compare and you have to throw that. Okay, this is called optimistic log. So forget about hibernate part. We'll talk about it in a bit, probably in next class. But right now, optimistic locking is nothing but when two users are trying to update or two threads are trying to update the same record. um, Optimistic locking is nothing but the stale data. It doesn't let you update the stale data. Yeah, it's going to throw an exception. You need to introduce a mechanism to throw an exception. Hey, you are updating a stale. You have the stale data, and you modified the stale data. Refetch the good data and then update it and write it to the database back. Okay, so
Okay.
that is what is called optimistic logging. Pessimistic logging, in other words, pessimistic, as the name suggests. Oh, maybe somebody else modify the record, so I will not let them write it back to the database. What I'll do is I'll keep it for myself. Okay, I'll keep it for myself, and until the round trip, like I read the data, I update the record and write it back to the database. Okay, so
Okay.
which is like kind of it can introduce starvation of threads. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. So that is what is called pessimistic locking. Okay, it is very confusing part, and that's why most of the people ask in the interview question. Okay, any questions? Will you be able to explain now what it is?
Yes.
Go ahead, give it a try.
Optimistic train. Optimistic locking.
Mm-hmm.
When I when two users are updating the same data, it's up to the database. It has to tell the user that he is updating a stale data, and it should return exception to the user to refetch and modify the data.
Right.
If it is a framework, it would handle the exception by itself, like Hibernate. If it is JDBC, we have to handle that.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
In pessimistic locking, the user, he locks the data until
The round trip
he
of
checks
the
the
transaction.
round trip of
Yeah.
transaction.
Yeah. It's going to read and write. So until then, it's going to lock. So it is pessimistic that somebody else may modify it. So I don't want to take the chance. That's what is called pessimistic approach. Okay. Okay. So that means it lets you read when you're locking in pessimistic locking. It lets you read the data, but it will not let you write it. So it is going to put a write lock in there. Okay. Okay. So why we went to that is because we were talking about data integrity. So these all come in data integrity. These are all complex problems to handle. Okay. Ultimately, it's integrity of the data that needs to be taken care of when you are dealing with the business applications. Okay. So how these kind of locks and all that stuff is being controlled is using called transaction isolation levels. This is one other important interview question. So what are the different types of transaction isolation levels? You need to talk about transaction none, transaction read committed, transaction read uncommitted data, transaction repeatable read, transaction serializable. So transaction none means no transactions are supported. Okay. And transaction read committed, that means within a transaction it reads only the committed data. That means if somebody is partially writing it and it is not committed yet, you're not going to read that data yet. And transaction read uncommitted data, that means if somebody modified it but they did not even commit it, but you will be able to read that uncommitted data as well. Okay. Repeatable read, that means transactions, when you are reading it repeatedly, still it's going to return the same data. It's not like when you read it multiple times it's going to return different data. Okay. Within the transaction, after the transaction it can change. And transaction serializable, that means transactions are supported, and also there are no phantom reads or non-repeatable reads. Let's see what are these terminology, then talk about the transaction serializable. Okay. So the very reason of this transaction isolation levels is to see if the transaction is should support dirty reads or should totally prevent the dirty reads. What is a dirty read? If somebody else modified it during your transaction, you are not done with the transaction. Say for example, you begin a transaction, thread B also begin a transaction at the same time. They did some bunch of operations and they committed it. So you started a transaction assuming something, right? So your assumption basically is being modified. So your transaction should be agnostic to that, or your transaction should actually look at the database to see if something is modified or not, and all that stuff is being controlled by these transaction isolation levels. Okay. And what is non-repeatable read? That means a non-repeatable read occurs when transaction A retrieves a row, transaction B subsequently updates the row, and transaction A later retrieves the same row again. Transaction A retrieves the same row twice but sees a different data because transaction B updated something. Okay. Repeatable read means though you read it multiple times, you're going to get the same data. Non-repeatable read means when you read it, you get a different data and on occurrence 1. And when you're reading it again on occurrence 2, you're going to get different data because the condition that is satisfying the read is being modified by transaction B. That's called non-repeatable read. Making sense? What is non-repeatable read versus repeatable read?
Yes.
Okay. And a phantom read. What is a phantom read? Like this particular non-repeatable read is talking about exact same row. Okay. But whereas phantom read is talking about the entire condition. That means it's going to give you a new set of data. That means new rows. Okay. Whereas non-repeatable read, we are talking about exact same record. Okay. Exact same record, reading it twice, giving you different set of data. Phantom read is nothing but on occurrence of A, you invoked rows satisfying the condition, and it returned you 10 rows. On next occurrence, when you read it again, it gave you just 5 rows because transaction B inserted or updated new rows, and that actually makes your number of rows returned either less or more. This is called phantom. That means we don't know what it is, and they are part of your result set now. And transaction A and transaction B gave you totally different records. That's what is called phantom. Okay, so keeping this in mind, like when you're talking about repeatable and non-repeatable, you're talking about just one row, okay, that you are aware of. Whereas in phantom, you don't know whether the row that you read in transaction A will come back or not also. That's because transaction B totally changed your condition. Okay, so when you're talking about different rows, it is phantom. When you're talking about the same row, it is repeatable or non-repeatable rate. With this mindset, let's go back to the chat. When you say transaction none, transactions are not supported, no dirty reads, non-repeatable reads are not allowed, or phantom reads are not allowed because there is no transaction support at all. When you set transaction read committed, that means transactions are supported, dirty reads are prevented because we are not reading uncommitted data, and non-repeatable reads are allowed. That means non-repeated reads are allowed means same row may be modified by a different transaction, and you may see that differently. And phantom reads are also allowed. That means if somebody else actually changed the condition, that is allowed. If you want to see transaction read uncommitted, that means supported, and dirty reads are allowed here, and everything else is same. Transaction repeatable read. When you say repeatable read, dirty reads and non-repeatable reads both are prevented because we want to fetch exact same record on two different occurrences, like on two different reads from the database. So it is agnostic to somebody else modifying the record that you read. Okay. Then transaction serializable. What is transaction serializable? That means transactions are supported. That's all. It prevents dirty reads. It prevents non-repeatable reads. It prevents phantom reads. So this is how, like, when you don't want any of these to be prevented, probably it's easy. It's slow. When you want all this to be accommodated, or it can be either way. Like performance varies. Like you got to see depending on your data. Okay, you got to see depending on your data. Like you are taking care of bunch of more stuff in read committed and all that, uncommitted and all that stuff. Whereas in transaction serializable, you are making it like really simple. So it depends on the whichever is convenient to your application. Based on that, you are going to set your transaction isolation level. Very important interview question. You got to really remember this matrix. Okay, it's easy to get confused. Any questions? Any questions? Are we clear so far? Any questions?
We have the transaction isolation levels are we'll provide these for the database.
Yeah, we put it in the connection dot set transaction isolation level. Okay, so let's see here. So right now, when you are getting a connection here, if you are getting a connection, you don't even worry about all this because it that's why JDBC drivers are available. They default do it for you. Okay, like if you were to control stuff, then all this comes into picture. You see what I'm saying? if you were to control, like, oh, when what should my transaction be, like you say, like connection dot set auto commit false, right? When you say connection dot set auto commit false, then you're going to set like, oh, I want to begin a transaction and end a transaction. Okay, con dot begin transaction, con dot end transaction, uh, and you're going to set all these fields on the connection. Let's see if I can show it. See here, connection dot set transaction isolation level. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So before even fetching the statement, we are going to set all these. So based on that, it will behave. Okay. Based on
Uh,
that, it will behave.
by default, the driver is providing that.
Yeah. By default, the driver will provide you like probably one of these. Like by default, it will provide probably one of these. Like either read committed. I think by default it's going to be read committed. Depends on the individual driver.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then why we are going to use that?
Why are we using transaction isolation levels? Yeah,
Yes.
because in your applications, sometimes you may want to read uncommitted data as well, like when you're doing batch updates. Like sometimes you don't really care if the data modified or not. Your thread needs to win. Okay. Sometimes, okay, like sometimes you want to read. Okay, if somebody else modified it, you want to know within a transaction that something else modified. Okay. Like situations like I'm doing a migration, say suppose, and I spawned like 100 threads to do the migration of my entire database, which has like million records. Okay, if thread A already modified it, I don't want thread B to pick it up. If thread B already modified it, I don't want any other thread to pick it up. Or um, other threads that are picking up the same record should be aware that it is being modified, right? So during that time, we use this. Uh, Most of the times, even in our application, we go with transaction isolation level, read committed. Okay, read committed to avoid dirty reads, which is very important. Dirty reads should not happen. So that's why we use transaction read committed. But non-repeatable reads and phantom reads are allowed. Okay, so most of the times you may go with the read committed stuff, but there can be cases like based on the previous day's data, you want to do something on today's data. Like we maintain some historical data, okay, in our application, like how your investment portfolio performance changed. Okay, like from the time your investment account started with us till today, how your performance is moving. Okay, nobody is going to give me that data, so I have to harvest it every night. Okay, so if I have to harvest it, there can be a transaction that is actually updating 10th row, and based on that 10th row, I need to do something on the 11th row. Okay, based on that 10th row, I need to do something on the 11th row. During that time, some other operation must have happened on 10th row when I'm trying to do something on 11th row. Then I need to be knowing what happened. You see what I'm saying? Then I need to be
Yes.
knowing like, oh, somebody during my execution, point of execution, somebody else modified it. So in that time frame, probably I may actually use transaction read uncommitted as well. Like I want to know, okay, at that point of time, if thread B is modifying some stuff, I want to know that as well. Based on that, I may come up with a new performance number. So in those kind of situations, this may not give you perfect case, but um, what I'm trying to say is during your transaction execution, say for example, you're trying to do withdrawal, money withdrawal, and during your transaction execution, you had a new deposit that came into your account. Okay. Uh,
Okay.
when So you will be mad at the bank, right? Say, for example, they are trying to do a send your check. You gave a check to somebody, assuming some other deposit comes to your account. Okay. So it so happened that when they are processing your check, your deposit came in. Okay. They should not be saying like, oh, that's a different transaction, this is different transaction. um, I should return this check. I should dishonor this check saying like no proper balance in your application, in your account. You'll be mad at them, right?
Yes.
During actual withdrawal or during the actual processing of the of your check, then they should be knowing other transactions that happened as well. If they start reading uncommitted data, that's when they have a signal, oh, there is something else happening. They're going to pass your check temporarily. Probably they can hold your check for like next 10 days also. They can um, recorrect their transaction and all that, if your deposit is a fake deposit. But the thing is, when they do, they cannot do the dishonor of the check, right? In those kind of situations, probably you may want to read uncommitted data. You see the scenario, what
Yes. Yeah. Got it.
so yeah, that kind of stuff. But usually you may go with read committed, so to avoid any problems. Okay,
Mm, okay.
yeah, very important. Okay, see here, a JDBC driver might not support all transaction isolation levels. Also, if a driver does not support the isolation level, specify in an invocation of set transaction level, the driver can substitute a higher level or more restrictive transaction depending on the driver behavior. Okay, if driver does not support any of the transaction isolation levels, it is going to throw an SQL exception. Okay, that being said, let's take a look at row set. Till yesterday, we were dealing with result set, right?
Yes.
Now that's an interface, and there are like a bunch of classes that implement that interface and give various behaviors to that result set, and these are called row sets. So a JDBC row set object holds tabular data in a way that makes it more flexible and easier to use than a result set. Okay. So just before you joined, Teja, we actually looked at one example wherein we can actually modify the result set as well. Like you can insert a row, okay, that has utility methods to insert rows, new rows. Like I set new data, and then I said new insert row that actually persists to the database. Okay, persist meaning that actually saves to the database with the new row, whatever I am actually modifying it. You need not explicitly say save and all that. Through result set also you can do some manipulation on the backend. Now that being said, through with row sets you can do bunch of more stuff than just result set, helping you modifying or inserting a row. You can do bunch of more stuff which is called row set. And there are various types of row sets that are supported, like JDBC row set, which is called standard row set, and cached row set, web row set, join row set, and filtered row set. So let's see each one of these. But before that, what are the types of row sets that we can do and why we are using a row set is what we are talking about here. So all row set objects are derived from a result set interface and therefore share its capabilities. That means you have a result set, which is good. If you know result set, you're good. But row set is having more than just result set. It inherits everything from result set, and it has more as well. And what makes JDBC row set object special is that they add these new capabilities like function as Java bean component. That means it's just like a bean. It has more components within it, and it adds scrollability and updatability. That means the difference is even in here. Previously, till yesterday, we were using create statement as just this, right? Now we started using overloaded option of the result set of the create statement that actually makes it scrollable and updatable. Okay, so these are like various combinations that we can do even in result row set as well. Okay, and it has bunch of more like caching, filtering stuff, introducing some join samples, maintaining the connection, and or disconnected, like connected row sets, disconnected row sets. Like if you talk about this result set, connection is always been maintained. Okay, that's why it is easy to insert. Whereas here, um, like say for example, you inserted a new row. If somebody doesn't want to read that a newly added row. You cannot do that because by default you're updating the result set itself. But whereas with using row sets, you can actually see it only when you apply the changes. Okay, so that way connected and disconnected row sets are there, which help you bring in more capabilities. Okay, let's see how these are. Bean, if you know about Java beans like getters and setters, it has getters and setters, and it has a Java bean notification mechanism. That means you can add some listeners that, oh, some property has been modified, some property has been updated, and all that. So you will know what is happening within a row set object if you introduce these mechanisms. And it has like properties like getters and setters and all that stuff. Okay, then Java Bean notification mechanism. Like rowset object uses Java Bean event model in which registered components are notified when certain event occurs. That means if a cursor is moved, if a cursor is if something is updated, inserted, or deleted, you should know. So you can add a listener. Okay, and then change to the entire row set contents. So you will know all these. Like the notification of an event goes to all the listeners components that have implemented row set listener. So you can say like, oh, rosette dot add listener, and you can add a listener. So you will know somebody added something, somebody updated. So event handling, event handling from swings and adability, right? So they adapted something in here as well. So you will know any movements to the cursor, and you can act on it accordingly. Rosette objects. Rosette objects add scrollability or updatability. Like we saw, it behaves like beans, and it has scrollability and updatability. What is it? Some data DBMS do not support result sets that can be scrolled, and some do not support result sets that can be updated. If a driver for that DBMS does not add the ability to scroll or update result sets, you can use a row set object to do it. Okay, so that means some result sets that are written by some databases does not have any of this capability. Though you are saying it on the result set like this, okay, the actual result set that is being written out may not support these in few databases. Fortunately, in MySQL, it is supporting it. If for some databases it is not supporting it, you may use row set. So now you know why we need a row set, right? If you don't need a row set, you can stick to result set. But as I said, it gives more control. Like if somebody doesn't want to see updated values, you cannot control that. If you use row set, you can control all that stuff. Okay. Fine. If a driver for the DBMS does not support, you can use a row set object. A row set object is crawlable and updatable by default. So populating a row set object with the contents of the result set, you can effectively make result sets scrollable and updatable. Kinds of row set objects. A row set object is considered either connected or disconnected. That means it can be connected to the database connection. That means connected to the database or disconnected also. A connected row set object uses a JDBC driver to make a connection to the relational database and maintains that connection throughout its life. A disconnected row set object makes a connection to the data source only to read in the data from a result set object or to write in data back to the data source. After reading from a or writing a data to the data source, the result set object disconnects from it, thus becoming disconnected. That means you read the data, disconnect it. You write the data, disconnect it. During much of its lifespan, a disconnected row set object has no connection to its data source and operates independently. So that's why disconnected data sources are lightweight compared to connected row sets, because anything related to reading a file or reading to a database, um, or always maintaining the connection of the database is heavyweight, because it has to do bunch of other stuff, not only just maintaining the connection. It has to be agnostic to all these transaction isolation levels and all that stuff, so that makes it heavyweight component. Whereas disconnected are like simple pojos. Once it has been connected, it is like a plain old Java object, okay, or a collection. So kinds of row set objects. Connected row set objects. Only one of the standard row set implementation is a connected row set object, JDBC row set. So in the four things that we are going to look at, JDBC row set is the only one that is connected always. Always being connected to the database, a JDBC row set object is most similar to a result set object. and is often used as a wrapper to make an otherwise non-scrollable and read-only result set object scrollable and updatable. As a Java Beans component, a JDBC row set object can be used, for example, um, in a GUI tool to select a JDBC driver. A JDBC row set object can be used this way because it is effectively a wrapper for the driver that obtained its connection to a database. So, not just that, if you want to get additional features of row set for a result set, you can use JDBC row set because both are same. It is just a class that is implementing row set or result set. Okay. Then disconnected row set objects. The other four implementations are disconnected row set implementation. Disconnected row set objects have all capabilities of connected row set objects. Plus, they have additional capabilities available only to a disconnected row set. That means these are much more heavier, much more functional than connected row set. For example, not having to maintain a connection to the data source makes disconnected row set objects far more lightweight than a JDBC object or a result set object. Disconnected row set objects are also serializable. That means you can write to a file or send over network. That is what is serializable. And they can even be used for sending data to thin clients such as PDA and mobile devices, mobile phones and all that. Let's see. So let's see examples of each of these. First, let's see it for JDBC row set, okay, which is a connected row set. Let's see a JDBC row set example. So what we are doing here, you're getting the connection from get MySQL connection. So that means you have everything in here. Okay, you're getting the connection. So you're creating a statement. You're getting the result set, and then what we are doing in here is, okay, this is how you get a result set, right? Instead, if you want to get a row set, JDBC row set, what we are doing here is the connection object, you're passing it to JDBC row set. Okay, connection object, you're passing it to JDBC row set, and we are setting the scroll insensitive or scroll sensitive, and then you're querying the database and executing it, and you have a listener also. Okay, you have a listener also here. So cursor moved, row changed, row set changed, all this stuff will be invoked based on anything that is happening on the JDBC row set. Okay, anything happening on the JDBC row set. And you can also add you can also invoke insert row, just like how we did it in our previous example. Okay, that's when probably the corresponding method like cursor moved or row changed, row set changed, all these kinds of events can be invoked. Okay, so let's see if there is any other constructor instead of again getting the data, if we can actually convert a result set to a JDBC row set. Let's see if there is anything like that as well. Yeah, there is one. I need not have to do again like this, getting the connection and all that. Probably I could have got it like this. Okay, you see the difference? Okay, and I think we don't need to even execute anything. Let's see if it works. Okay, okay. I'll also put something like this to update it. Okay. So if updated, that event should be invoked, right? So let's see if that is also happening. Okay, so let's give it a try, like what's happening. This is a connected row set, so nowhere again we are fetching the connection. See here, right? Nowhere again to insert a new row we are fetching the connection. Okay, so it is always maintaining the connection. See, result set not updatable. This result set must come from a statement that was created with a result set of type this. The query must select only one table and cannot use functions and must select all primary keys. See, something is broken here. See, let's go to main 29. See, this is failing actually because I need to set more. Conquer updatable also. Okay, so otherwise it is failing. Good. Okay, it is still failing on something. Let's see. So invalid type of row set must be either result set type forward only or insensitive or type scroll sensitive. If we did not give up updatable, it did not work, right? Mm. Again, it's failing. Connection done. Alright. So what does it say? Not updatable. Result set not updatable. This result set must come from a statement that was created with a result set of type. Ah, you know what? That's funny. Okay. Here, the statement should be like that. It's not this way. Okay. Probably now it will not give that problem. Yeah, now it went fine, right? Right. Let's see. I'm trying to update something. Insert. See, row set event. Something is invoked here. Cursor changed listener. See, row changed. So that is what has been invoked. Okay. So cursor moved. So all these events can be identified. Yeah. So if you see here in the database, it inserted in, now there are 3 records, right? If I refresh it, the 4th record is inserted with +1. Okay, so that's how JDBC row set is, like you can use the existing result set to actually convert to a JDBC row set, and you can do a bunch of stuff in there. Okay, and you can add a listener and act on it, like, oh, once cursor moved, you, if you want to do something or if you want to be notified, you can add a listener to it. Okay, There is no listener like this for result set. Okay. Any questions? Are you guys with me? No questions? Any questions?
Uh,
No? Okay.
are we going to use these rule sets in real time?
Real time, even I did not use it because we don't use JDBC in our project. We use Hibernate. In my previous project also, we were always using different kind of frameworks, but these are always good. Like all these frameworks that are going to be used in the industry has some limitation or the other. At some point, you feel like, if I used plain JDBC, it would have been faster. Okay, so in those cases, probably you can use rosets. Like if I'm writing a bad job, um, uh, that bad job needs like a bunch of stuff to be updated. Okay, and if I'm using Hibernate, there is a Hibernate batch update, but it's like either all or none. The thing is, if something is failing in between, there can be problems that you are not aware of, uh, and you got to be handling those. You will know those only during runtime. Whereas with plain JDBC, everything is in your control and you can use it like however you want. Probably wherever you're using plain JDBC, you can use rosets. It's like
Okay.
the question is same as, do we use result set? Like if I'm not using framework, I'm not using I'm not using if I'm not using JDBC, I'm not using result set. In the same way, I'm not using roset. So think about it like going forward, if you are using result set, probably use JDBC roset. Okay. Probably this is more towards either your application will use a framework or rely on JDBC. Or if you are going to write some frameworks on your own in your company, probably you will put those on top of JDBC. Is it making sense? Like you should know JD. My take is there can be n frameworks that can come in, and industry may be using those n frameworks, but you should know the fundamentals, right? So if you know the
Yes.
JDBC correct, then you can adapt to any of the other frameworks that it is going to bring in. So probably this helps you in giving you a foundation, but it depends on your project that you may use it or not. Okay.
Uh, can you tell me the difference between the connected and disconnected? What's the difference?
Yeah, connected and disconnected. Once you see the sample, you'll clearly understand. But what I'm trying to say is, it holds the connection all through. That means until you close, like until this step is all been executed, this results at objects holds the connection to the database. It
Okay.
is expensive, right? Holding the database connection till end is expensive.
Yes.
You're doing bunch of operations back and forth and all that. Those are like expensive operations. Whereas if you look at any other sample, the disconnected ones, let's see how it is doing. And also after this insertion, if you are spilling out what is there in row set, by default, all those come to this. You see what I'm saying? Like you need not have to fetch those again from database.
Okay.
Yeah. So you cannot control saying like, I don't want this. Don't apply these changes yet. Insert these, but don't apply these to me yet. You cannot do that. Whereas if you go to, say for example, cached row set, okay, this is one of the examples of disconnected row sets. Let's see what it is doing. Like it's fetching the connection, and if you view table, that means you are viewing what is there in the table. Okay, fine. You executed the query and you viewed everything, and then you're seeing you want to test the paging within that. Okay, so you iterated through the result set, and you're saying like, okay, if id equals to 4, change the id to something else. Okay, change the id to something else, and you invoked update row. Okay, if you want to sync from database again, you want to say like crs dot accept changes. Until then it will not come out. If I comment this, crs will not know about it. Okay, that means after execution of this after execution of this step, connection is not there anymore. Okay, connection no longer exists with it. If you were to do again, you have to pass the connection object and do stuff. That's the difference. Okay, accept the changes, then result set gets the new changes, then you can move and again insert stuff. Like whenever you do this operations on the database, you got to again accept those changes from the database. Until then you will not get those. Then so that way, once the operation is done, connection is been gone. So you're not holding the connection, piggybacking the connection all the time. That's why it is lightweight. Is it making sense? Did you follow what is the difference?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Once it is executed, no longer connection is with it. Let's try executing this. Okay, before that, so now you know the difference between connected and disconnected. Let's see what this slide has to say. These are all disconnected row sets. The cached row set interface defines the basic capabilities available to all disconnected row set objects. The other three are extensions of cached row sets. Okay, so that means cached row set is the fundamental one we need to understand. Then web row set, join row set, and filtered row set are all based on cached row set. Okay, so a cached row set object has all the capabilities of JDBC row set object. Plus, it can also do the following: obtain a connection to the data source and execute the query. Read the data from the resulting result set object and populate itself with that data. Manipulate data and make changes to that data while it is disconnected. Do you see that? While it is disconnected, it is manipulating all the data. Then reconnect to the data source to write back to it. Okay. Then check for conflicts with the data source and resolve those conflicts as well. That means if there is any conflict within it, looks like internally it can resolve those conflicts. So and also this will be aware of what all the changes we did on the database, and like it will not be aware until we do a apply change. Okay, then a web row set object has all the capabilities of cached row set object, plus it can do following, like web row set can write itself as an XML document. Read an XML document that describes as web row set object. That means you can write all the data that's been fetched by web row set to to an XML file. That means it can be serialized. Okay, and you can read an XML document that describes a web row set and write it to the database, something like that. Okay? And a row set join row set object has all capabilities of web row set object, and therefore also the cached row set object. Plus, it can also do the following: form the equivalent SQL join without having a data to connect to the database. Okay, say for example, let me finish the filtered as well, then we'll go to the example. A filtered row set object likewise has all the capabilities of web row set object, and therefore also a cached row set object. Plus, it can do apply filtering criteria so that only the selected data is visible. This is equivalent to executing a query on a row set object without having to use a query language or connect to a data source. That means you fetched everything, and on top of it you can do a filtered row set. Okay, let's see the samples one by one. Cached row set you saw here, right? Let's execute this, and I want to put a debug point here and see if it is writing to the database until we say accept changes or not. Okay, so here it starts with main, it gets the connection, it does the cached row set sample. Okay, it does the cached row set sample, views the data, and then does the test paging. Okay, so I'm putting I have a debug pointer in test paging. Okay, let's see. So this is viewing the data. That's fine. Okay, it's viewing the data, and now we're getting everything from result set. And how many rows are there in here so far? In we do, we have 4 rows, right? Now it executed something. It started the result set iterations, and we are saying like, okay, we don't have a row id equals to 4. If you see the condition in here, if you have row id 4, then we are doing some update operation. We don't have a row id 4, right? I'm just going to update this guy to 4, okay, to just satisfy that condition. Okay, so let's see now again. Okay, so when I equal to 4 is getting the, we're updating it, and we're calling update row. Okay, we're calling update row, and now what happened? See here, it did not write anything so far, right?
Yeah.
It did not write anything so far. Now we are saying accept changes. That means it's writing and also getting the data probably. So now what is happening? So now it has written it to the database, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So now it updated it. Okay. Then what happened? So it's moving on. Now we are adding a new row. Okay. Let's see. It went to previous page, move to insert row, and adding a new row. Okay. Do we have? Okay. It's going to add a new row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So let's see that. It says insert row, move to current row. So at this point, do we see anything written to the database yet? Nothing, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is not written yet. Once we say accept changes, then it is actually fetching everything. So writing it and fetching it back. Now when you do view table, this time you should see how many rows? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. 5 times this loop should be executing. Okay. Or we can also see it from here. I'll put my cursor in here. This should be executing 5 times. It should spill over. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that's the difference. Like whereas in previous ones we never did accept changes. It's always been there because connection object is always there with you. Okay. Next, web row set. Okay, web row set is here. What it is doing is, I think I have an old example on this one, but I'll modify while speaking. So let me actually remove the unused variables. I'll probably upload all these samples that I'm modifying as well. Okay, so here web row set is what it lets you persist is what they said, right? Let's see, from main method got the connection and passed the connection to web row set, and it said test web row set. Okay, let's go there. And what it is doing here, test web row set, file name. Okay, and so price list, web row set, username, password, like these are probably the username of database. and this is the URL of table. Okay, and we put the key columns, like we just want to get only one column, say suppose. Okay, student, student or students is our table.
Student.
Student, yeah. Okay. And now we say okay, execute it. Once it has been executed, we are inserting new data. Okay, we don't need to insert new data, but we'll show that sample as well. Like okay, let me insert new data. Like okay, I'm just going to put new date like this. Okay, ID equals to 1999. Okay, and I'm inserting a new row, and now new row is inserted. It is accepting the new data, and we print out everything. After we print out, we go to before first, and what we are trying to do here is we need not print out for this example. Actually, what we are trying to do here is update. That's okay, you guys know update already. We don't need to do that. So after going to the first row, now what I'm doing here is I need not go to the first row as well. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here is once I inserted the new row, I'm writing it to the file. Okay, write XML, and then we are good. Like once we do the write XML, okay, so once we read the write XML, it's everything is written to the XML file, which is good. Then we are reading everything from the XML file that we have written, like writing to the XML, and also we are reading it to the XML and looking at the size. Okay, so that means we can either write to the file or read from the file. Okay, read from the file we may not do it. I can show the sample if you guys want, but I'm just removing this one as well. All I want to show is whether we are writing it or not. Okay, we will be able to write just like a web row set is actually writing it to the file, price list file. Okay, with the new data that you have. It's throwing an exception. Good. So it could not fetch the connection probably. Why? Null pointer 161. Okay. Okay, let me put the debug point. What is actually causing?
Username password is root.
Oh, where? Here, right? I did
Yeah.
not change it. Yeah, I thought I changed it everywhere. Okay. Okay. So size of the web set is 5, and now new row is being inserted, and now the size became 6. Okay. Let's see. Did it insert the new row? It inserted the new row, and now if you go to the file that has been written, it has written the file here. Okay. See here, select star from student and all that. It's a type. So it is reading everything, like just like database thing. It is actually writing everything in the columns, okay, and everything in row that it has, like data definition. Metadata means it is about the column definition. It is putting, it has all the stuff, and this is about row. Each row, its name, value, and for all the three columns, it put in all the values. Okay, all the values. Once we convert it again, once we read it, probably it should actually go back to the same way. Right? So this is about like if you can serialize the data. Web row set is you can write and read it back to the result set. So you can persist it or send it over in a network to somebody else who wants to use it and all that. And then two interesting examples: join sample and filtered row set. Okay, let's see join sample. Think about it like I have two tables. Okay, I have two tables. Let's go from main method, con.get connection, and join sample. This is in a class dot get supplier coffee bought by supplier. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to fetch something. I'm trying to execute a join query. That means select name of the coffee from coffee supplier as the table, where supplier.supplier name is like the name that I passed. So this is a join query, which is going to give me all the coffee supplied by acme.inc. Okay, acme.inc. But here, and it is spilling out whatever data that I asked for. This is the regular join that we're just executing an SQL query. Whereas if we were to achieve it through using um, this one, join row set, this is how it looks like. So this is the name, and what is happening here is we're constructing a cached row set, and we're setting the command select star from coffee. Forget about the username and password. I'll change it, and I'll create these tables as well. Um, See here first. Select name coffee and username, password, and all that. We're executing this query first. Select star from coffees, and then we're executing this called suppliers. And what it is doing here is join row set. It is adding the row set of coffees and suppliers on supply ID, SUP ID. This is the common column between them. If you look at the join query that we have written before, these two are joined based off of SUP ID, right? So we are just joining it using these IDs, okay? And then we are just iterating through and spilling out the data. If supplier name equals to the supplier name from like the supplier name that you are looking for, then spill out the output. So that means instead of joining the database, you are just fetching the data from both the tables, and you can use join row sample, and you can do your joins on the disconnected data set. That means you have list of all coffees, you have list of all suppliers with you, and you don't need the connection object to do the join anymore. In those cases, you can use a join sample. Making sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So probably this is another database I created at that time with a different batch. But let me actually see if I can create the same database in here. This is what students one dot account db. When did I create this? Why is it showing it as this kind of database? ACCDB. What is that ACCDB? Let me try opening that. Or I can create any other sample as well. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to waste time on this. Okay, so now we have student table right here. I can create another table called student location. Okay, student ID int, and this is probably the foreign key, and address like city, where do they live. Okay, so simple table here for us. Okay, so we have bunch of students here, right? So we're going to select, and I'm just inserting some data here. Fremont, and to another student that we need is okay. Another student. Okay, right. So now we have these two tables, student and student location. So we'll modify it accordingly. Okay. So SPDB user and all this, and here we're getting the connection, and here we're going to say select star from uh, student, student location node, and then where S and SL, where SL dot city like city name, and S dot student ID, right? S dot ID equals to SL dot student ID. Okay. So this is a giant query that we are going to use. Okay, city name and all that. Uh, okay, so this is the standard query. Now if you are using a join table, you're going to get student, okay, student, oh, that's student locations. And here, so let's start from student. Okay, student location. Now we're going to student on ID, and here student ID, right? So this is the column we are going to base it off of, and students from city, we're going to get city name. um, Here city name, okay. And then what is that we are going to forget? City equals to city name that we are passing. So both should yield the same result. That's the idea. Okay. So okay. Uh, so let's see. From main method, get connection, everything is fine. Now here students from each city, right? Each city. Um, get students from by city. Get students by city name. Okay. So given a city name, you want to get all the students. And what's the name that I want to pass? Framework. Okay. So now using rows, join row set, also I'm going to pass the same city name. Okay, fine. So that student city name should give us somebody, and then in the same way, student, yeah, it should give us somebody. Okay, so let's try and execute this now. Okay, okay, get students by city name. City name is Fremont, and what is this? Fremont is the student ID. Okay, and what's his name? Right here, what is his name? uh, Fremont, one of these guys, right? Let's see. mm, Execute this. Okay, see, it's not fetching anything. That means it threw an exception that we didn't know what it is. Let's see.
That query has select coffees.coffee underscore name.
Oh, still has it. Yeah, that's okay. Cool. What do you want to fetch? A start name, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Let's see now. And also I want to always make sure you're printing the stack trace or printing the exception. Otherwise we will not know anything about it. Okay. Okay, so okay, it is printing out now. And whom did it print out? Print out this person. Okay, fine. Let's go to now cached row set. So it executed both. Now we are constructing the result set, joining it based off of this. So none of those will satisfy. Okay, let's see. Let's say this one. So it identified a student ID. Oh, I'm getting only the student ID. Ah, get string of name. I should be printing out name. And I saw there is another exception here. JDP exit. That means JVM crashed. Checking for an interface. Okay, let's see. Looks like JVM crashed on this example, but let's see why it crashed. Okay, let's see. Let's go to join rosette, execute, execute. Okay, fine. By now there is any exception? No, no. Yeah, fine. I think previously JVM crashed. Okay, so here, so this is how we can use join row sets without having a connection to the database, and you can still do a join query. Okay, any questions on this? Any questions? Are you guys good?
Mm.
Yeah. So in the same way, filtered row set. Okay. So what is that we are doing in the filtered row set? I may not modify this sample, but you guys can modify it. But what I'm trying to say here is, look at it from main method. Okay. From main method, filtered row set, and you're saying like test filtered row set. So what is that it is doing? I want to get only states. Like a state filter is only these states I need to fetch. Okay. Only these states I need to fetch. City array is SF or LA. Okay. So that means I have a city, my city. That means I created a filter. Say suppose the city should be in either SF or LA. So what I'm trying to fetch here is select all the coffee houses, and I'm viewing all those. Then I'm going back to the first row again. I'm setting the filter. That is, give me all the coffee houses whose state ID is falls in one of these. Okay, whose state ID is falls in one of these. Then I'm displaying the filtered row set, and again I'm going back and I'm setting the filter of city array. That means city stays in one of these two. Okay, what is the second parameter in the city filter? Let's see that. City filter has the parameter column number. Okay, so what we are trying to do here is we are giving the column number also on which the filter should be applied on. Okay, so that way it will know which column to set the filter. Okay, so you guys can bring up an example like this and use it, or create coffee and coffee houses accordingly. This should be straightforward actually. Okay, if you run into issues, then we can implement it here. But all we're trying in our standard example here, if you want to use it, you can use the same filter, like city filter. Okay, and we need not use the this one state filter, but use a city filter. Okay, city filter, and I'm removing the state filter. Okay, we have city as Fremont and Sunnyvale, I put, right? So I want to fetch the students who are from Fremont and Sunnyvale. SPDB user, SPDB user. Okay, so localhost. Okay, okay. So here what we are doing, filter array is going to do fill city, and column number we want to give. So what's the column number for us in the city? City is column number 2, right, on this one. 2. Okay, let's see, column number 2. No, it's 0th index, or column number starts with -1. Evaluate result set, column number greater than 0. I think it starts with 1, because result set starts with 1 thing. Okay, so now select star from student locations, right? Location. Okay. So what are we trying to do is fetch the students, probably fetch the students, or I think in this case we got to write a join query. Let me see, that's why I started writing it. If you want to fetch student location, like if you want to fetch the student names, you need a join query here. So where s dot id equals to sl dot student id. Okay, sl dot student id, and here s dot name comma sl dot location. Okay, so now our query becomes 2. Are you guys following, right? Are you guys with me on this? So yeah, I'm just fetching that, and in this case from our table it's a second one, right? S dot sl dot city, right? Sl dot city that we are interested in. So filter is going to be applied on the city, and now view the results. Okay, fine. And when we are saying view table, we got to be saying again, like here we got to modify again the same query, right? Same query, and then name, and then city. We can remove everything else. Okay. View filtered row set. From the filtered row set, we can fetch again the same stuff. Okay. Unfiltered row set, get string of name and id, name and city. Okay, everything else I'm removing it. Okay, so I think we are good. Let's give it a try here. Okay. Okay. Student array, and execute it. And now we did not apply the filter yet. So it's going to display probably all the students. Okay, by now all the students should have been displayed, right? Only because student locations has only 3 records, that's why it is displaying all 3. And now let's apply the filter. If we say free mountains anywhere, only these 2 guys should be displayed. Okay, so before first set the filter, and now we are viewing the filtered results, so it should display only 2, right? Let's see. Okay, so it displayed only two people whom we are interested in. Okay, so this is about filter. So you can write as many conditions as you want disconnected to the database as well. That's just another utility from process. Is it clear? Okay. So I'll upload these examples one more time just to make sure you guys use the same schema as me, and I'll give you new data this schema that I have as well. So that way we are all in sync. And did you get a chance to install on your local and run the examples? There are like advanced data types, like blobs are used for, blob is nothing but binary long object. These are used for image storing an image, or like anything in binary. Okay, clob is used for character arrays and stuff like that, and XML data can also be stored. So these are some advanced data types that you're going to use in your projects depending on the need. Okay, yeah, I think this concludes JDBC. Any questions? Will you be able to answer a few questions like why JDBC is used, why row sets are used, what are the various steps in JDBC, what is the result set, Hmm. what is a connection, transaction isolation levels, optimistic locking, and pessimistic locking. If you are able to answer all these, then you're good to start Hibernate. Like we can start Hibernate from next week. But before that, make sure you're done with all this stuff. Then Hibernate makes sense to you. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. Okay. Why I'm doing Hibernate immediately after this is because